Hello everyone, welcome to Module 3. I could tell you're super excited, I am too. We're going to cover some super cool things. So, let's take a look at page 132, 133, the visual overview of formulas and functions. So, we talked about last time how we put together a formula. Let's just do an example right now. So I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, for example. And we talked about all the different ways that I could put in, let's say we want to do something simple, add them together. I could type in sum, grab the range or the individual cells, add them together, and that didn't work because it referred to itself. You see, it's not always perfect. Let's try that instead. There we go. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 6. Okay. Now, let's try the same thing with insert function, which is where we're going to start off. And that is the box that you see on the right-hand side on page 133. So I'm going to grab sum, press OK. And it's going to say, what are the numbers you want to add together? So it just put in the range C6 to C9. This is basically the same idea as using AutoSum, but it will show you what's going on. It will tell us the result is going to be 6. I press OK, and it gives me a 6. It puts in the same formula, but this allows you to break it down and see what's actually happening depending on which one we grab. Okay, so that's called the function arguments dialog box, and that lets you select cells or put in what numbers you want in order to do the calculation. It really helps sometimes because not your numbers with the cells might not always be adjacent. So this could help you pick and choose to put them together. The other thing that's really important is here you'll notice that it talks about the cells on the left-hand side. If I go back to home, and I go to cell styles, they're talking about here where it says calculation, check cell, explanatory, input, output, etc. And this is how you could color code your cells depending on what they're supposed to do. And we'll see that a little more in the example we're going to run through in this module, where we have some cells that just have data that we want user input, some cells where something is calculated, and so on. Okay, and by separating them, it just helps us know what cells do we put stuff into. So let's take a look at this chapter. Okay, so let's look at an example. Naturally, it will be all about food. All right, so going through the book, I'm up to page, let's say, 139, 141. I put together an example called the Cake Factory. Okay, so this is a real recipe, which you could make if you like. On the right-hand side, it's called the Cake of 3. Now, it took a little bit of finding to do because you'll notice that this cake, unlike most recipes, is in weight. Using weights before we convert it makes it a lot easier for us to do calculations. We could convert it each step, it just takes a little longer. You'll note I put a little note here. If you go to that link, you'll basically see the conversion I used for baking powder, which we have 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder equals about 9 grams of baking powder. So especially in a commercial environment, if we were to weigh everything out, we would be able to figure it out. Now, basically, the reason why I made this sheet is I wanted to figure out how much it would cost to how much we'd have to buy to make X number of cakes, and how much it would cost to ship them out. And maybe over time, we'll add more information like how much these things cost and so on. But this box right here is our actual recipe, right? This is how we actually make the cake. So that's not what it's supposed to do. All right, so let's figure this out. Interesting. Not quite sure what it's doing there. There we go. Let's see if we could center this now. No, I don't know. Let's move on. Okay, so I'll redo this box. Here we go. Okay, so the thing that we want to be able to input, like you can see in the example in figure 3-5 on page 141, is this one right here. Because we want to be able to type in a number, and it's going to do all the calculations for us based on the number of cakes. So I'll go to where it says cell styles, and I'll pick the one under data and model that says input. So this indicates this is the field that we type numbers into. Now, we want all of these guys, however, to automatically calculate based on this number. So I'm going to go into cell styles, and I'm going to pick where it says calculation. Okay, so we know that these cells will automatically come up with numbers, and I believe that we have enough information to calculate these guys as well. So I'll press calculation. Okay, so let's just do a little quick math, and we'll start out by putting in 1 cake. Okay, so 1 cake, and we're going to do this all using cell references, so we're able to scale it up. So we want to take, we put in equals, telling Excel that we're going to put in a formula. We put in equals 1 times the weight of ricotta, and we press enter, giving us 300 grams. And let's quickly do that for the rest of them. Okay, so right now we have, for each cell, it's going to go take this number and multiply it by that number, and we've set them up for the rest of the cells, so we'll take this number, multiply that number, depending on what ingredient we're looking at. Okay, so this is going to give us all of our weights for 1 cake, and maybe let's move this down a few spaces, and we'll put in a weight calculation. So we'll put in total weight, and we're just going to add these numbers together. Okay, so basically our cake equals just over a kilogram, and maybe we could format this as a number. We want 2 decimal places. We'll have a thousand separator. I don't know about that. Maybe we'll get rid of the decimal places, and then we'll just have that number like that. Okay, so right now we're up to just over a kilo per cake, but we have some other considerations as well to figure out how much this thing is actually going to cost to send out. Okay, so next, the shipping weight is going to be a little more expensive because we're going to take this subtotal, right, and we're going to add to it this weight, which is the box weight in grams per box. Okay, so we're going to add those in, and this will give us 1289 is the cake weight plus the box weight. Okay, that actually isn't going to work. We'll have to fix this formula because right now if I change this to 2, it's still only going to add 1 box. Okay, so we're going to have to do, okay, so this is the formula I put in. I did B13, which is the total weight, plus, and then I put in brackets K14, which is our box weight, times the number of boxes. Okay, so it's going to add our subtotal together with the multiplied box weight, depending on the number of boxes, and that will give us this. And then we want to figure out the shipping cost, and the shipping cost is going to be $1.25 a kilo. So we could just take this number, multiply it by $1.25, and that didn't work. Okay, so to fix that problem, we take B19, which is our shipping weight, and we multiply that by our shipping cost, but because this number is in kilos, or thousands of grams, and this number is in grams, we divide it by 1,000. We hit enter, and it's going to be $1.61 shipping cost, right? We also have this other factor of the box cost per cake, which we haven't added in yet, and we could do that too. I'm just going to add that down here. Okay, so we already have the weight of the box calculated, but not necessarily the box cost. So I'm just going to take this number and add in, I'll do the same thing, I'll put in a bracket, this number multiplied by that number. Okay, so then I'm going to get 236, and we'll again change this to calculation, and maybe I'll redo my boxes. Okay, so I'll change this to with box cost. Okay, and right now, when I put in my order, I basically know how much, what I'm going to have to buy to produce that many cakes, and how much it's going to cost to ship. Since we don't have cost for ingredients yet, we don't have all the information we're going to need, but we're going to get there eventually. This is just for right now, just to illustrate the point. Okay, I'll go here, put a box around it. So far, so good. Okay, so let's see if this works. After putting in all these numbers, let's see how it works. And this is basically the same idea as 3-5 on page 141. So let's do it by a factor of 10. It's going to say I have to buy, this is again in grams, I have to buy 3,000, and the total weight would be 10,000 or 10 kilos. And I could put in a calculation to, let's say this would be in grams and this column would be in kilos, and I could order it. Because when I want to scale this up to 1,000 cakes for my factory, I need to figure out how much that is, and this is going to be 1 million divided by 1,000, and I'm going to get 1,000 kilos left over. So that 1,000 kilos is going to be how much total weight of things I have to buy. But for example, I'm going to need to buy quite a bit of eggs, sugar, ricotta, flour, etc. Just in case you're wondering, the eggs do go by weight, because especially if you buy them pre-shelled in a container that goes into a machine, like for an industrial process, eggs weigh on average, you'll note I put in 60 grams each, and I have 3 eggs in the recipe. Okay, and if for this amount, for 1,000 cakes, it would be 1.2 million kilos. It would cost $1,600 to ship, but we would also have to pay for the boxes, which would cost us the additional money in between them, about $900. Oh, sorry, $600. Okay, and of course we could bring that out as we go forward. So the idea here is that really we have all these calculations set up. We could adjust the cost of ingredients or the amounts or the cost of boxes or the cost of shipping. We change the box weight if we get a heavier box, or lower it if we get a smaller box. So we're able to change these numbers in here. But the only thing really that we need to tweak in this model is how many cakes we want to order. So if I say 50, then right away I get all the measurements to put together the 50 cakes and the costs that are associated with it. In our next step, we could put in cost for each of the ingredients, and we could figure out what the ratios are, like how much the average ingredient is, which is the most expensive. Can we change the recipe? I'm using this as an actual recipe, but there are many other possibilities. Okay, so based on this, we're going to continue with some of our math functions, and you've already seen many of these, and we're just going to run through them. So for the purposes of this exercise, I'm just going to create a copy of this sheet, and I'm going to move it to the end. Okay, so we'll have all these same numbers, but it's going to be called, here we have sheet 1, here we have sheet 2, and we'll just do some calculations on this sheet. Okay, so first we'll cover a few of these, many of which you already know, and we'll go from there. So we'll start with average. We just type in equals average. The tool didn't work. The tooltip will tell us it basically will average these numbers. I'm going to grab them, hit enter, and it will give me the average of these numbers, which basically means adding them together and dividing them by the number of numbers that there are. Okay, in this case, not particularly useful, but it's what it is. Next, we have count. Now, count will go and count how many cells have a number. In this case, it's going to tell us how many ingredients we have. In this case, we get a 6. Okay, so we know that there's 6 ingredients. We count the numbers instead of counting the words because it's more difficult to count words. But you say, wait 1 second, one of these things doesn't have a number. Let's say it's a 0. How do we count the words? Easy. Here we do count A. And this will go through and count any cell that has something in it. Okay, so if I grab this list, it's going to look between A8 and A13 and try to find all the cells with something in it, and there are 6 as well. Max will find me the biggest number in a range, which is useful for things like a high score, whereas min will find the smallest number, which is useful for things like who won a race, which the lowest number is usually the best. And sum will add a whole bunch of these guys together. Okay, so that's basically most of them. If you look at figure 3.6 on page 142, there's a couple others, but those are the important ones. and we'll give you an idea. We could also, now this is very important, on page 143, we're able to nest functions within each other. So when we do that, and we're going to go into this more when we have symbolic logic, like with if statements, but basically, if you look at the example, they're using round, which will round the number, with average on the inside of it. Okay, so that's worth it to know. Okay, so keep on following the text, and we're going to head over to page 149, which will talk about rounding. And the next thing we are going to look at is what if analysis. Okay, and that is at the bottom of page 149. Okay, so we're going to take a look at using goal-seek, which is on page 150. Now, let's say I asked you, how many cakes would I have to make that the total weight is 1 million kilos? I have a giant shipping container. It could hold 1 million kilos. I say, how many cakes do we have to make? Will it fit? And you're like, I have no idea, but let's figure it out. So you basically do the first option, which it talks about on page 149, called trial and error. You click on your one box that you could change on the sheet, and you change it to 51. Hit enter, it changes to this. You're like, okay, that's not good. Let's try 91. Still not very good. Let's try 803. Still far away, okay? So how can we get this to automatically figure out how many cakes we need to make the total weight 1 million? So we click on the Data tab on the ribbon up here, and we click on where it says What If Analysis. And we go to where it says Goal Seek. It's going to say we want to set a particular cell. So we're going to go here because we want the total weight, and we want it to equal 1 million. Right? And then what do we change to make that happen? We grab this cell up here. Okay, so we're telling Excel we want this cell, which is this one right here, the 54,000, to change to 1 million, and we're going to do that by manipulating this one up here. Okay, B4. We're going to press OK. It's going to run through all the possibilities, and it's going to say, hey, we found the solution. In order to get to 1 million, we have to create this many cakes, which is 918. Now you'll notice that it best fit the million, because that's the number it had to reach, but it gave us a fractional cake because that's just the way it got divided up. Since we can't actually make 918.27 cakes, we could change this to 918, and then the numbers would be slightly off. We could go one more, and we'd have just over 1 million in terms of weight. So that's where it uses a fraction to try to best fit how it's going to work. Okay, and the important thing to keep in mind is that we're able to do this with all the cells. So for example, what happens if we wanted to use exactly, I don't know, 1 million grams of eggs, right? So we'd go to what if analysis, goal seek, we'd say we want to set this cell to be 1, 2, 3 million grams of eggs. We click up here, hit enter, and then we press OK, and it would say, oh, we found it. You'd have to make 5,555 cakes in order to get to 1 million grams of eggs, right? And that would weigh 6 million kilos. Grams, I think. Yeah, grams. Unless we changed it. No, it's still grams. Okay, so that's basically the idea, and then our number down here, I believe, would be the total plus the box. There we go. Okay, so that is how you use goal seek and what if analysis. Okay, and you can play around with it too. There's an example on the bottom of page 150 and the top of page 151 that goes through this process. Okay, now super critical. Okay, this is really important. Sometimes if you mistype something or you put in a mistake, it's going to give you this thing called hashtag value. It's an error message. And you can see a list of all the error messages at the top of page 152. And each one of them gives you an error and it will tell you what's going on. This is really important because sometimes you have no idea what you put in wrong, and this could help you figure that out. Okay, so if you run through the example in figure 3-16, that should help you get through it. So that's the end of session 3.1. I hope you guys learned something and you found what if analysis really cool, because that allows you to automatically change the numbers to find your goal depending on what it is, and it will give you a really easy way to end up at that point. I'm going to upload this video and this file to Module 3. Let me know if you have any questions.